This week's podcast is brought to you by the Krusty Krab.
Home of the world famous Krabby Patty!
What's a Krabby Patty?
Why, it's only the most mouth-watering, appetizing food in the 7 seas. So why don't you come on in and have yourself a Krabby Patty today?
The Krusty Krab! Come spend your money here!
The Krusty Krab is a fictional restaurant in a cartoon that you can never visit. Bikini Bottom, you can never go there.
Nickelodeon.
From Nickelodeon Studios in Burbank, California, this is the Nickelodeon Animation Podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Hector Navarro. Welcome to the Nickelodeon Animation Podcast. I am so excited to be sitting in the recording booth at Nickelodeon Animation Studios today. In Nickelodeon's 25-year history of producing Nicktoons, there might be no character more iconic than that absorbent and yellow and porous square of positivity, SpongeBob SquarePants. And one of the reasons SpongeBob is going to go down in cartoon history with the likes of Bugs Bunny, Scooby-Doo, and Mickey Mouse is because of his equally iconic voice. Our guest has been doing the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants for over 15 years. He's a perfect example of perfect casting, and it's literally impossible to imagine SpongeBob without Tom Kenny. How are you doing, sir? How you doing, Tom?
Good, man. Is this the interview?
Sure. It can
It's
be.
just us a pre-interview.
Yeah. Do a little pre-interview show.
There's no Charlie Rose intro.
Do you want to intro yourself? That would be awesome. That'd be great. You've got the voice for it. No, I was just going to tell you that my first celebrity sighting after I moved to Los Angeles, I grew up in San Diego. So when I first moved out here for work, my first celebrity sighting was yourself.
Wow.
Which was great. And
that guy talking to himself at the bus stop is Tom Kenny.
Better than that. No, better than that, Tom. I was in a comic book store here in Los Angeles, and I was already geeking out because I was looking at comics, and I look over and I saw Patton Oswalt. And I went, oh, that's amazing. Cool. There's my celebrity sighting. That's great. And then in walks Tom Kenny, and you walked up right behind him, and you smacked him on the ass.
I remember.
And then I was like, that's Tom Kenny, and that's perfect.
That
Great.
was a twofer.
That's right, twofer, yeah.
There's Patton Oswalt and his life partner, Tom Kenny, having a little spat.
That was great. Okay, so I've got so many questions for you, so many things I want to get into. But first of all, how do you keep track of all of your characters?
Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, really, you just kind of compartmentalize. Like I know, like I'm usually on 8 or so different series at any given time.
Sure.
That seems to be the number. And then after that, stuff starts getting canceled, but hopefully something that you auditioned for in the past is coming down the pike. And so really, I do it by day. It's like, okay, Monday is Miles from Tomorrowland and, Ultimate Spider-Man. Tuesday is Adventure Time. Wednesday is SpongeBob and Uncle Grandpa. Thursday is Powerpuff Girls and Clarence. And then Friday is just kind of piecemeal kind of stuff, just kind of catch-up stuff.
That is amazing. That's an incredible skill. I'm sure you hear this all the time because your IMDb is insane. It's not even a real IMDb. There needs to be another category for what kind of IMDb that is with its own database. It's amazing. And then speaking of...
I have melted down search engines.
Yeah.
Just that. It's funny, because you do get credited. IMDb, I don't know how they find out. Do you know? How do they find out about this stuff?
No idea.
It's up there instantly. I'll record something and then it'll be up there almost instantly. But since every part that you do is credited, people go, wow, you have hundreds and hundreds of entries on IMDb, but a lot of them are like, guy behind door number 5, know, and then some are bigger, obviously bigger in size and scope, but
sure.
But it does add up to a pretty crazy number just because, if you're one of the lucky lottery winners of to make a living in voiceover, you can work practically every day.
Yeah.
And every day is 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 different series, and you'll do 2 or 3 characters at least on each show. So it is kind of rabbits multiplying.
I love your work on the Powerpuff Girls, and now it's coming back. And that's a question I want to ask you is, what is it like stepping back into those roles that you did years and years ago? Are you listening to old episodes? Did you listen before you started, or was it just like right there at the tip of your brain?
Well, that's a good question because one thing when you make your living kind of acting like a kid and being an arrested adolescent, and I also really love my job a lot. I don't want anybody else's job. This cartoon voiceover is the last job I want to have, like ever. It's not a stepping stone to something else. It's not a transition. I'm just like, I just want to do this till I'm hopefully a really old dead guy. So, with something like Powerpuff Girls, I don't realize how long the pendulum has taken to swing back because it's been years of you just going to work every day and having kids and doing stuff and living your life. And it isn't until I look at the date that the original Powerpuff came out that I was like, holy cow, this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the way pop culture works, everything comes back around immediately, sometimes more than once. Sometimes, whether it's Ninja Turtles or Strawberry Shortcake or Ponies or a lot of stuff, Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo, any of that stuff. And, hopefully SpongeBob will be one of those evergreen perennials that comes roaring back every so often.
I got a good feeling about that SpongeBob guy. I think he's got some legs. I think he's going to be around for a while. Yeah.
Sea legs, get it? Meow. Gary, that was funny.
Oh my gosh. And you must have people, talking about keeping up with these voices and not knowing like how long the pendulum is swinging. You also must have people just years after you've wrapped a show, you do know that, do that voice. And that might, keep it fresh in your brain at like a comic book convention or anything like that. Yeah.
Yes, that happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like, when I do the occasional con. And one of the funny parts of this livelihood is that some video game or cartoon that took you 20 minutes in 1996, and then you walked out the door and, did a bazillion other things and never returned to that character, was somebody's biggest thing.
Yeah.
When they were a little kid, or maybe they were sick in bed playing Spyro the Dragon games or something, and you're their Spyro. And you just kind of, for you, it was just something where you went in, you did it, you did the best job you could, the check cleared, knock on wood, move on, Bob's your uncle, I'm auditioning for whatever the next thing is. But it's funny, like, that IMDb you were talking about, like, everything on there is somebody's biggest thing.
Yeah.
And obviously something like SpongeBob it's actually been around long enough that it spans generations.
Yep.
Where you have people, young families, like people with kids, and the parents say, I grew up on SpongeBob and now our kids watch SpongeBob. And oftentimes there's a grandparent there who said, we didn't understand it when we first saw it, but now we love it. Now we're empty nesters in SpongeBob. Oh, it's terrific.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's kind of nice to be part of something that has that impact on, not even impact, because it's just, at this point, SpongeBob is kind of like this old friend that's always been in the house.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing.
SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants.
Often, there are people that say, I had a great childhood and SpongeBob was part of it. And, every time I do a Comic-Con, I get these elaborate drawings, some from kids and some from adults that say, thanks for the greatest childhood ever, or, thanks for showing me how to use my imagination, stuff like that. And then you get people going, my childhood was awful.
Yeah.
And SpongeBob was an escape for me and cartoons were an escape for me. So thanks for providing relief when things weren't so good. And both those things are fine with me, but you realize that these cartoons, I think animation connects with people on a really deep level, and animated characters connect with people on a very deep level.
Yeah.
And it's funny that this is kind of a recent phenomenon that I've been running into. It's kind of just started happening, is where millennials will run into me and start crying.
Yeah.
Like, because it's so emotional. It's like, maybe they're going to college or childhood is something they're leaving behind and they're starting to take their first steps in the world. And SpongeBob's a heavy thing for them.
Yeah.
And they just go, oh my gosh, you're the voice of SpongeBob. And I go, yeah, I'm SpongeBob. They go, men and women alike, male and female alike, whatever hit you in your childhood.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to see somebody from whatever Breaking Bad and you go, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But if it's something that was seminal to you and a game changer for you when you're in your formative stage.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? Like if I ran into Captain Kangaroo or Mr. Rogers or Mel Blanc especially, I would probably fall apart because it's big.
Yeah.
And, we never think of ourselves as looming large in people's lives, because, why would we think that? But you realize it is. Not us. We don't loom large in people's lives, but SpongeBob does.
Exactly.
SpongeBob as a character and as a show and as a source of enjoyment for them is very fraught.
Yeah.
And it's that's kind of a phenomenon that I'm just starting to experience. I guess has to do with the timeline of how long SpongeBob has been on the air and where the kids that started out watching SpongeBob in 1999 are now in their lives.
Exactly. That was their formative year, whatever age they were. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's funny. Another thing that comes up a lot is adults and young adults and sometimes older adults, like 30-year-olds or whatever, if they were 10 or 11 when SpongeBob started.
Sure.
They'll come and go, oh my God, my friends and I still speak to each other in SpongeBob memes.
Yeah, I know.
Or I had a friend in 4th grade that all we did was we bonded over SpongeBob jokes, and he's still my best friend. In fact, I'm at this Comic-Con with him, and the guy comes over. Oh my God,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy must get autograph.
Talking about SpongeBob, I'm so glad that we're heading down this path because my favorite thing about this character is everything you just mentioned and I think that he's an incredibly important character for cartoon history because for me, he heralded the resurgence of innocence and that being okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I just, I think that's kind of what helped for sure at the beginning SpongeBob stand out. And I guess like in terms of comedy archetypes, you're either the wise guy or the naif.
That's right.
You're either like the super naive childlike guy, which in the stuff that influenced SpongeBob is represented by Stan Laurel, Jerry Lewis,
right?
Maybe Curly from the Three Stooges, where they just act like innocent kids. Mm-hmm. And then there's the wise guy that would be Moe or Oliver Hardy or whatever, but. Because I liked all the wise guy characters as a kid too.
Oh yeah, sure.
But you're right, SpongeBob kind of stood out, and I think that's very much a product of and sprang from Steven Hillenburg's personality and approach to life and approach to comedy. Steve's a very wide-eyed guy who's interested in everything and is a very hopeful, sweet guy. And so I think the character that he created had a lot of that in his DNA.
Yeah.
And I think that only works if the naive character isn't the object of derision, like
exactly.
by the creators of the show, by the writers, like
yes.
like going, optimism, how stupid.
Yes.
I mean, Squidward can think that.
Sure.
Right. And then that's a nice counterpoint. But I think in terms of the writing of SpongeBob and creating him, that was a really, really huge part of his personality. And when Steve pitched the character to me, he was very clear about that.
Yeah.
And I think, because he's told me, I know, on some level, saw some of those qualities in me, which is why he thought of me as the voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I enjoy life. I'm a happy guy.
Yeah.
But
I got to take this opportunity, too, to also, I have this chance. I'm in this booth. I'm here at Nickelodeon. I just wanted to tell SpongeBob, listen, SpongeBob, I don't know if you're aware, but a lot of people are big fans of yourself. And I just wanted to say, thanks for being such a good guy, because it means a lot to me, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I think part of it I owe to my imaginary friend Tom Kenny. Underwater sunsets sure are beautiful, eh, Squidward?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is great. Just the three of us. You, me, and this brick wall you built between us.
Yeah.
Sunsets always remind me of bowls of fruit. What do they make you think of, Squidward?
Explosions. I mean, erosion.
If I were to die right now in some sort of fiery explosion due to the carelessness of a friend, well, that'd just be okay.
Let's go back and discuss some of your influences growing up, the type of animation that you liked, your comedy influences. You started out doing stand-up. At what point in your development as a young person did you say to yourself, I want to do comedy, I care about comedy? When did that happen?
Really young, very young, like childhood.
Yeah.
I was always drawing comic strips and, I was horrible at sports, of course. And, I found that by making funny comic strips that featured like teachers and kids in the class and all that, and being the funny guy, you could do it. And people always go, oh, you must have been the class clown with all your nutty, zany voices. You must have been the class clown.
Sure.
And I wasn't. It wasn't until probably junior high school that I started to feel comfortable more showing that side of me. But I would write jokes for the class clown. Who had no problem putting himself out there, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was funny, so I liked writing stuff for him to do, and just going, hey,
you were the joke writer.
I was the joke writer. I was the class clown's writer because I was such a wimp, like such a wussy,
That's so funny.
And when I think about it, kind of where I wound up in my career, being a cartoon voiceover guy, kind of is that what. It's like being the drummer. It's like, I'm playing in the big rock and roll band, but I'm behind all this stuff all this stuff that I'm banging on. I'm not the front man.
Sure.
And I call it the shy show off.
Yeah.
Where you're simultaneously shy, but there's enough look at me in you that you're out there being funny and doing voices and stuff. So you're not totally shy, obviously.
I never thought about that. Does that give you more freedom, do you think?
Oh, it's incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
It's miraculously freeing, like levitation freeing. It's funny, to go back to your earlier question, I wanted to be a cartoon voiceover guy or thought about it. It was always in my mind since earliest childhood, and the people who did the voices for cartoons and how they must do it in the age before the internet or even very much animation writing being available at a small town library.
Sure.
It was always on my radar. I was always thinking about it, and comedy albums and things like that. And it all kind of went together, drawing comics, thinking about cartoons, playing in bands, rock and roll bands and stuff like that. Like I did all that, but it took me a long time to break into voiceover.
Really?
So I started doing stand-up comedy in clubs, in bars. Well, I was still in high school, and I answered an ad in the local alternative paper that said, we're looking to put together a comedy. Have you ever thought about doing stand-up? Show up, And I showed up, and it was before the 1980s comedy boom. So not very many people showed up.
Got it.
A handful of years later, there would have been a ton of people that showed up. But it was like me and maybe 4 other guys. One of them being that class clown that I wrote for, Bobcat Goldthwait.
Ah, okay. Now it all comes together.
So that all
That's
comes
right.
together. He was the class clown.
That's where Bobcat is.
In our
Okay,
high
great.
school yearbook, him and I are co-class clowns.
That's awesome.
Like it's us and the girl. There's the female
great.
class clown,
Sure.
and then male
guys
class
shared
clown.
it.
It was a toss up. So we answered this ad, and we couldn't even drive.
Yeah.
So we had, and Syracuse is kind of a far flung place. It's not like you can take a subway out there. So we had a friend who was a year older than us, who's 17, drive us to this gig. He went up and did stand up too, and I loved it. It was off to the races. And when we first showed up, the guy who ran the gig, who would put the ad in the paper, was like, "You're children. You didn't tell me you were children." And we go, "Well, you didn't ask us. Come on, just put us out." And and then we gave back to him, and he loved that.
Yeah.
Like real,
This is
like, come on, Gramps, put us on. And we're still best friends. Me and Bob met in first grade, and went through our teen years together, loving punk rock and going to see George Carlin concerts. We saw Andy Kaufman when he was wrestling women on stage. We saw Steve Martin when he had dark black hair and a beard.
That never happened.
And an arrow through his head. Yeah, we were kids.
Wow.
We saw punk rock and comedy is what we were all.
That's so
It was
cool.
all what we loved.
That story.
It's what I still love.
Yeah, that story you just told me. That's so punk rock that you and Bobcat Goldthwait had to get your 17-year-old friend to drive you to do stand up. That's so punk rock.
Yeah, and our
That's
parents
awesome.
had no idea. Like I tell the story
even
in Bob's documentaries that this guy Barry Crimmins was calling the house to book us for the shows. Okay, I'm going to put you on next Wednesday. And my mother couldn't understand, why is this 30-year-old guy calling the house of a 16-year-old dude? What?
That's so funny.
What's happening here?
That's so funny.
And of course, what was happening here is like, hey, I'm a stand-up comedian now.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah.
So, now the downside of that is that when you're a high school kid and you suddenly are doing exactly what you always wanted to do, and you were hoping that it would be awesome to be able to do it, and then it really is awesome, it's hard to feign interest in geometry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're just sitting there thinking about
your next set and
you're just thinking about I'm writing jokes. Hey, that'll make a good joke.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of bad about that now. And as a parent, I go, oh my God, I would just be appalled if my children. You need to shape up, mister.
At what point did they learn from you that you wanted to be a voice actor, that you want to work in cartoons, and how did they react to that?
So my parents, they were a little, once they, I don't know that I've ever told this story before, but when I was living in San Francisco and I was doing okay as a local stand-up in San Francisco, my parents came out to visit me. I didn't want them to worry about me.
Sure.
So I put them up in a way too nice hotel.
Yeah.
It's on me. I'm doing all right. I was like, oh, how am I going to pay for this hotel I got my parents up at? And then at the show, Robin Williams was there.
Wow.
And he told my parents that I was funny. This is probably like, 86, 87.
Oh, my gosh.
He came up to them and said, oh, your son is very funny. He was a good writer and his stuff is really good. And, you don't need to worry about him. He's very funny. And I was worst Robin Williams impression ever. And I always marked that as the point where my parents stopped worrying.
Wow.
When Mork from Mork told them that I was going to be okay, they said, oh, okay, this isn't a fever dream. He's not delusional. He's not a lunatic. He's not a nut.
He's going to be okay.
He's going to be okay. He knows what he's doing. And wow, and people kept coming up, the club owners were coming up and going, you're good. Tom's very good. He's on the rise, And I think that trip out to San Francisco in the mid 80s really kind of put their minds at ease.
Wow.
And so I did stand up for quite a while, pursuing voice work and not getting very much of it.
What?
Auditioning for it and just going, God, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. This is what I really want to be doing. And, I did Conan, I did Letterman as a stand-up, like before I was doing any voiceover, but I wasn't loving it. I wasn't feeling it.
Wow.
I mean, I liked it. I
Sure.
loved it up to a point, but I was like, I didn't love it as much as some guys.
Sure.
And I always felt vaguely guilty about that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like Bobcat to this day gets itchy palms if he doesn't go up and do a few sets a week.
That's awesome.
And Robin was like that.
Yeah.
And Stephen Wright
Some guys
is
are
like that.
Some guys are like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
A lot of guys are like that. And I really was lacking that gene, where I was like, after a while I was like, I knew how to do it, but I didn't love it.
Sure.
It sure beat the heck out of working on a loading dock or something, which I've been doing, or cutting meat. So I was glad to have it, but I was kind of inwardly troubled that I didn't love it more.
Yeah.
And then, but something inside me, like an instinct, just said, I think voiceover is the place where my weird skill set might be the best utilized. When I did start booking a little bit of voiceover.
What was that like?
Oh my gosh. It was kind of like the first time I did stand up, where the first time I did it, it went pretty good. And it was just like, wow, this might be a door opening for me. It's very exciting. Like I think a door might have just opened and maybe I can walk through it.
Yeah.
That's how I felt when I was 16 and did stand up for the first time.
Well, at what point did you have that Robin Williams moment where you go, okay, this is my career now, and I think I'm going to be okay? Or have you still not hit that point? Because you talked about that before, that thing of you're just a guy that likes to work.
I do. I love what I do. And I also, I'm also a guy that, like, if I go, like, one day without working, I think it's all over.
Tom, come on. You're Tom Kenny.
I'm
Tom,
like,
you're going to...
I know. People are like, you are mentally ill. But you're either stupid or sick in the head.
Yeah.
I'm just, maybe I've just, maybe I've just had 35 really good years. It could be a fluke.
Sure.
Maybe it's a statistical anomaly.
Yeah.
So
that must be what it is. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Billy West and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of the voiceover people have that, where you're so glad to be doing what you want. It's kind of like you marry the most beautiful, most awesome girl in the world, and you're afraid that she's going to get taken away from you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, I don't want to lose you, baby.
It's love. It's love. What you're saying is that you love this.
You love what you do. But a lot of us, since we did spend a lot of years where we were doing other stuff, trying to break into the business, which, is pretty much the standard path for everybody, I guess, it can engender like the mentality of someone who grew up in the Depression,
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you're like you never get over feeling poor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even when you're Scrooge McDuck, you still remember when you were in the Klondike mining gold.
That's great. That's great.
So but when I first did it, it was just like an out of body, beautiful experience on every level. The people, the stuff, and being an animation as a lifelong animation fan with very minimal drawing skills, I was like, this is a way for me to be involved in the animation industry, despite the fact that my drawing stinks.
Do you remember your first gig, your first voiceover gig? What was it?
Well, my first voiceover gig, going back to Syracuse, I went into like a leather store / head shop in Syracuse and just asked, hey, your radio commercials are boring. How about if I write some radio commercials for you?
No way.
And they're like,
Well,
it worked. That's the beauty of growing up in a place that's not a major city.
Sure.
Like if you have any gumption whatsoever, which most people don't, if you have any gumption whatsoever, people just go, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because Bobcat and I started like a comedy troupe in Syracuse while we were in our teens, and we just went into a bar and said like, hey, Tuesday nights are kind of dead in here. Why don't you give us Tuesday nights? Well, we were like 16, 17 years old. And there's a guy sweeping up in like a pool table nobody's playing on, and he just went, yeah, okay. So,
oh my gosh.
If you grow up in a major city, there's already the Improv. There's already Catch a Rising Star. There's already the Comedy Store. They're going to go, no, your children, get out of here. So, so that was the first time I did voiceover. So I wrote like, and I'm sure they're bad. I don't even have copies of these, but they were like parodies. They were like Twilight Zone parodies and stuff like that with me doing Rod Serling and who's from Syracuse, by the way, and all these things. And I had a friend of mine that was, had a reel-to-reel recording rig in his house that I played in a band with, and he cut these commercials together for me, and so that was my first time hearing my voice on the radio. Like, wow, they're playing my Down Under Leather radio spot. That's cool.
Was there any sort of, outside of the animation industry, reaction about Rocko? Was there any fan? Did people know you? Did people, hey, you're Heffer?
Yeah, well, not at the time.
Right.
Well, sometimes at the time. Because it was a Nicktoon, so if you watched Nickelodeon back then, and if you're a 90s kid, you knew Rocko's Modern Life. And, along with Hey Arnold and Rugrats and Beavers and Real Monsters and Ren and Stimpy, of course, which was the show to me that changed. That was a big game changer.
Sure, yeah.
When you look at what was around then, it was all toy commercials. It was all like, gummy bears and, robot shows and stuff like that. And comedy, it wasn't squash and stretch comedy.
Yeah.
And, which is what most of the stuff that I've done kind of is in that bag. So Ren and Stimpy, I think, was... I'm very grateful that Ren and Stimpy happened, and Billy West was a great idol of mine even before I was doing voiceover. Before I ever met him, I was like, man, that guy. that guy. If I could work with that guy, or kind of try to be half the voice actor that guys like him are. And even if I can be half as good as them, I'll be doing all right.
Hello, Rocko.
Hiya, what's up?
Do you know where I can find an elk?
How about the Elks Club?
Ooh, good thinking. Thanks, Rock.
Anytime.
Rocko's Modern Life was my first series. So that was early 90s, 92, 93 probably.
And
Rocko's Modern Life, Joe Murray was a creator, and Carlos Alazraqui, who was a San Francisco comedian who also worked at a health club right near my house in San Francisco.
What?
Again, we're talking. These are the tendrils that you. I know. I feel like I have to mention all this stuff. It's hard to keep track of it all.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But if you make a flowchart of it, it's pretty effed up, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he suggested me to Joe Murray and said, "There's this funny guy, Tom Kenny. He loves cartoons. He's good at characters.
Yeah.
You should at least have him come in and read for this Heffer guy."
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Now, before that, I had done a few episodes of a short-lived Dumb and Dumber animated series.
I remember Dumb and Dumber, the animated series. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like a villain on it that was based on Ross Perot, which tells you how long ago it was.
I remember Ross Perot.
Who at that time was current. But,
that's right.
But, so I wasn't one of the two Dumb and Dumber guys.
Sure.
Which in the movie are Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels. But in the show, so Matt Frewer was the Jim Carrey guy.
Gotcha. So he was dumber.
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff Daniels
was dumb.
Bill Fagerbakke.
Oh, amazing. There's another tendril right there.
There's another tendril. That was the first time I ever met him.
That's great.
And who knew? You know, we got along great. And
What was it like to see the animation on TV when it was all done and hearing your voice coming out of that?
oh, I loved it. I auditioned for Joe Murray. I was Heffer. I kind of based it on my, he was kind of like this cow that wasn't really bright, but he was also sweet. Kind of in the SpongeBob tradition. That might be where Steve Hillenburg saw the efficacy of having like kind of a wide-eyed, innocent character.
Yeah.
He was kind of based on my then 13-year-old nephew, my brother's son, Sean, who was just sort of like this all the time and, just sort of shy and always kind of looking at it. He was happy, but he was always kind of looking at his feet too. And so I kind of did my lousy impression of my nephew for Heffer, and Joe liked it. And I remember walking into the room for the first time, and Charlie Adler, who was just, working, he's always, he predated me in the business, so he had already done a ton of stuff and had all this range and could do all these things. He voice director now as well as voice actor, and does stuff for Nickelodeon directing now as well as voicing. I walked in and he was doing like a 3-way conversation where he was doing 3 characters in the scene.
Wow.
And they were like, Charlie, do you want to get the characters separately and then we'll cut it together later? And he's like, no, forget it. So, and I was just like, oh crap. You know what I mean? I could never do that.
It's the big leagues.
Yeah, I better improve quickly. Wow. I always say I felt like it was like I stepped into a typing class where everybody could type like 300 words a minute, and I'm like the Hunt and Peck one finger guy. Yeah. And then my typing got better. I guess the 10,000 hours theory. If you don't get better at something, something's wrong. But
yeah,
that was a really big watershed, like angelic choir moment for me, and it was so fun.
Boy, look at that baby go! Adventure, the open road. It just doesn't get any better than this.
What is that like to know that you are a lot of people and animation fans and aspiring voice actors? You're their pinnacle. You're their sort of idol that they look up to.
I do get that, especially at Comic-Cons and stuff like that, and panels. And the interesting thing is, like, up until sort of recent years, voice acting wasn't really so much on the radar. Like, it wasn't it was a weird aspiration to have. Like, when I wanted to do it, it was a very strange aspiration to have, especially because TV animation was kind of at a nadir anyway, pre-Ren and Stimpy.
Totally.
Like, what would you do? All the stuff you love is over.
Yeah.
Looney Tunes is done. Bullwinkle's done. Max Fleischer Popeyes were 100 years ago. All this stuff. What are you going to do? Get in a time machine? You know? So when Rocko got not picked up, or when it ran its course, I should say, it did their 52 half hours, then it was done. And I didn't book another voiceover for quite some time after that.
Wow.
And I was auditioning, and so there was part of me going, maybe that was my voiceover career. Maybe that was it. Tom. It was really fun. You know what I mean? I was like, well, it was nice while it lasted. Back to stand up, I guess. When I was doing stand up, auditioned for Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
Went really far up the food chain. There were 2 slots open. It came down to Spade, Rob Schneider, and myself.
Wow.
Fly to New York, Lorne Michaels, Catch a Rising Star.
Yeah.
I had a really good set.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. I think I might have just had a really good set at a Saturday Night Live audition. Am I crazy?
Yeah.
And I think, and didn't get it.
Yeah.
Obviously, Rob Schneider and David Spade wound up on the show. And at the time, that was the most devastating thing that had happened to me, where I was just like, this is the brass ring. This was my chance. And for whatever reason, maybe it's something I'm giving off. Is it fear of success? Is it something? And, now in retrospect, it's just like Lorne Michaels is putting together his fantasy football team, and he's looking for a peg of this shape and a peg of this shape, and I just wasn't the right shape.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was devastating. Like, I cried. I thought that was it. I'm done. I'm toast. What's wrong with me that I didn't get that job? I felt like I did good. And now I feel like that was a gigantic, fortunate blessing circumstance that I didn't get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I feel like I dodged a bullet. You know what I mean? I feel like I've got a way better career now than I would have, and I feel like I have a career that I love a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Because, you know what I mean? Because Saturday Night Live has had a ton of people on it.
Sure.
And most of those people wind up as, whatever happened to that guy? He had a couple of good characters.
Yeah.
He wasn't bad.
Didn't they make a movie about that?
He was pretty good. He was pretty good.
Yeah,
He wasn't the best, but
Where's
he
that
had a
guy?
couple of good characters. Whatever happened to that
Yeah.
guy? And the answer is, because I run into those guys around Los Angeles, oftentimes they're doing their laundry at the laundromat that you're walking by and you go, oh my God, that guy used to be on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And now he doesn't have a wash machine. So it's
incredible. Wow.
So I mean, not to, the only reason I'm telling that story is because people are asking me about it a lot lately, because
great.
Schneider and Spade are telling it on their book tours. And anyway, kids, adults, teenagers, old people, human beings of all ages, the stuff that you think is a tragedy that's going to knock you down sometimes turns out to be a total beautiful ray of sunlight in disguise.
And what a SpongeBob moral that is, huh?
Yeah, that's perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, for doing this.
Thank you.
We so appreciate it. I think everybody, along with me, is doubly inspired to continue doing with whatever they're doing, or maybe they're going to try something new. So thank you
Cool.
so much, man. That was awesome.
Thanks, man. Well, thanks everybody out there for giving a darn and watching cartoons and loving cartoons as much as we all do.
I hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with the great Tom Kenny. That was so much fun. Thrill of a lifetime. Okay, you're not going to want to miss an episode of the podcast, so please come back, visit us next week on nickanimationpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts for more episodes and tons of bonus content like photos from the podcast of me and Tom, as well as original production art from SpongeBob and Rocko from our very own Nick archives. Thanks to the awesome crew who puts this podcast together. This podcast is produced by
Jonathan Highlander,
Dana Vasquez Eberhard, Kelly Smith,
Andrew Hubner.
original music by Useful Creatures. All of the incredible social media for our podcast is made by
Narbe Manassians, Greg Nix,
and thanks to the man who works the controls and makes me sound better than I have a right to,
Manny Gralva.
Until next time, thanks for listening to the Nickelodeon Animation Podcast, and keep watching cartoons.